14 through 30. Then Jesus, filled with the power of the Spirit, returned to Galilee, and in a report about him spread through all the surrounding country. He began to teach in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. They said, "Is not this Joseph's son?" He said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.' And you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things that we have heard you did at Capernaum.'" And he said, "Truly, I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine all over the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon. There were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian." When they heard this, all the synagogue were filled with rage. They got up, drove him out of town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way. May the Spirit bless our hearing of this ancient story. Amen.
I invite Alan to come forward as we explore in this series that for some is really important and others not. What if we had good religion? We're picking different R letter words because I'm kind of quirky. And this week I wanted to look at risk. And I want you to step forward if you would. Because I'm asking people, if you'd like to, on a particular day, let me know. There's no priority, just really people who I know something of their story to say something about risk. And so I invite you to meet Alan.
Good morning, everyone. I have to admit I'm really humbled to be here. You see, it was just May of this year I took a risk, a big risk, and I walked through the doors of Hillhurst United Church for the very first time in my life. I just returned to Calgary from an addiction recovery program in the US, and I knew that I deeply needed to rebuild my spirituality and rediscover who I was, and I had no idea how I was going to do that. So I took a great risk, and one that I rarely take ever in my life, and I actually reached out to people and asked for advice and support. And a good and dear friend of mine, Chris Fisher, brought me here and to see what went on. And I clearly remember that first Sunday and John saying, "Whoever you are and wherever you're from, you are loved, you are forgiven, and you are set free." Now, for a Catholic boy like myself, especially at this time in my life, those words were ridiculous, to quote John, and rather empowering. And you see, it's this brand of religion that I found here that allowed me to take more risks, and I kept coming back every Sunday. And I joined the Wednesday morning contemplation group. and I sought out Susan to become my spiritual advisor. And this is what I've learned about good religion and taking risks in a short period of time. Good religion does not impose itself and its doctrine upon you. It inspires us to dig deep into ourselves and figure out what that means for each of us. Good religion encourages me to dig deep each and every single day and take the risk of looking at myself without risk or shame or doubt or judgment, and frees me to rediscover my core beliefs and my core values. Good religion empowers me to risk owning my story and to learn from it and not dwell in the past so that I can continue to evolve and transform into something real. And good religion permits me to risk believing there is goodness in myself and kindness, even when I can't see it or when I don't practice it. Good religion allows me to risk believing in something, again, much greater than myself, a higher power that I'm still attempting to define, and to accept that it is His will that I'm on this earth for, not my own. And good religion motivates me to risk being truly vulnerable, and in doing so, to forgive myself and to love myself again, which in turn has fostered me taking the risk of loving others and accepting their love back into my heart. And good religion teaches me that all that I am at this moment has simply been preparing me for the next phase in my personal journey, and that I need not fear what that is, but simply take the risk in taking the next step. And good religion invites me to risk sharing my story and to reach out in hearing others' stories, because it is that sense of belonging and connection that makes us all stronger. And finally, good religion enables me to risk stepping out of the comfort of the darkness I'd become accustomed to living in and to face the bright light of God's love for me. Thanks for letting me share.
So like I said last week, what he said. Like, why bother write my sermons? I'm serious. But anyway, thank you. Let's pray. Oh man, God, you surprise us just when we think we got it figured out. Whew. You risk to love us in a new way. You invite us to hear in a new way. We give thanks for that privilege. Amen. So the sermon series, What If? We're looking at what if we had good religion? Because we know we could spend all day talking about bad religions. It's everywhere. It's in the news, it's in the media, it's in our neighborhood, maybe even in our house, how people define bad religion or live it. So I've been thinking about what is good religion and thought about risk. And I thought about risk on this day back in August because of what's happening on Tuesday. I was clearly aware, although things have changed in 2 months, hey? I don't know how they do elections for 2 years down there, but about the challenge and the risk of an election. And Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are the two names that go forward as leaders for the United States. And my American friends truly are shaking. There's concern. And we've heard all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to talk about the election so much as I want to show you a clip that kind of sums it up for me. It's a 1-minute video by a guy named Seth. I saw it on Facebook, and I'm not a Facebook guy, but this popped up, and here it is. This sums up the election in a sense.
Choices. I mean, they just don't love the two choices. I mean, do you pick someone who's under federal investigation for using a private email server? Or do you pick someone who called Mexicans rapists, claimed the president was born in Kenya, proposed banning an entire religion from entering the U.S., mocked a disabled reporter, said John McCain wasn't a war hero because he was captured, attacked the parents of a fallen soldier, bragged about committing sexual assault, was accused of 12 women of committing sexual assault, said some of those women weren't attractive enough for him to sexually assault, said more countries should get nuked, said he would be forced the military to commit war crimes, said a judge was biased because his parents were Mexicans, said women should be punished for having abortions, incited violence at his rallies, called global warming a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese, called for his opponent to be jailed, declared bankruptcy 6 times, bragged about not paying income taxes, stiffed his contractors and employees, lost $1 billion in 1 year, scammed customers at his fake university, bought a 6-foot-tall painting of himself with money from his fake foundation, has a trial for fraud coming up in November, insulted an opponent's looks, insulted an opponent's wife's looks, and bragged about grabbing women by the... How do you choose? Because so it's so even. It's so even.
Okay, that's all I want to say about that. He talks so fast, you gotta read it. Normally there's little lines, you can read it. It's quite funny to watch. But here's the thing. The way it comes, I'd say voting is the most spiritual thing you ever do. Marking an X on a ballot in Canada or wherever, you're saying this is the kind of community I want. And more than that, you're saying this is the leader that I want. And you should be able to explain that to your kids or your grandkids. So when we reflect on our life, I would love to have you take some time to think about risks and the risks you've taken in life. And we live in a very privileged upper middle class part of Calgary right here. And so our risk will be quite different than reading in the news of 100 refugees simply who jump into a boat because in some ways there is no choice and they risk their life for another life. Or on Friday, as we will celebrate, and I say celebrate, our Remembrance Day, to honor and remember and seek to commit to peace. We don't know what it's like, most of us, to be in a trench somewhere or somewhere in the world right now in a war, and there are many risks. So I recognize that risk is different wherever you are in the world, and I just say that up front. And there's all kinds of little risks and big risks that you and I take in life. And when I think of risks, I define it this way. It's to gain or lose something of value, to gain or to lose something of value. Or it's an intentional interaction with uncertainty. And that's really what faith is all about, an interaction with uncertainty. Sometimes the risks we make are dumb. Sometimes the choices I make or you make are dumb, and they're not even risks. When I think about this, I was thinking about my mother saying to me, "Don't ever put your tongue on a cold metal pipe." And you can hear that all you want, but when you're there and it's there, I can still see my tongue on Central Brampton Public School, and everybody surrounding me and looking at me as they poured warm water, and my tongue lay there before us all. We all take and make dumb mistakes and risks. But here's the thing, and I want you to think about this. What would you say has been some of the greatest risks you've taken? Was it when you changed career? Was it when you moved from one part of a country to another? Was it a risk when you had children and didn't know what you were up against? Was it when you said, "Yes, I do," and got married? Was it when you spoke an unpopular truth at a party or a business meeting? Was it when you said no more and you chose divorce and ended a relationship? Was it when you risked by walking into the church for the first time? Or when you said, "I'm an alcoholic"? Was it when you came out? Or was it when you decided that you would be the real you, your true gender? Was it when you offered feedback to someone you cared about and you knew they wouldn't like it? Was it telling someone that you actually go to church? Or if you're a 20-something playful person at Starbucks, the woman said to me it was doing sketchy ziplining that was risky to her. Was it risky when you tried something that scared you? Or when you said to someone, "I love you"? Was it calling someone out on poor behavior? Or as another man at Starbucks said to me yesterday, the greatest risk I ever took was believing in myself. Or was it when you told someone your deepest secret? When you admitted you were wrong? When you spoke out or walked in a rally? Or posted something contrary on Facebook or the internet? Was the greatest risk you ever had asking for forgiveness? Or telling your kids, "I don't know"? Or saying, "I'm sorry"? I heard someone say this week, a gay person, saying the greatest risk they have is when they're going on holiday, they have to Google up, "Is it safe for me there?" Now, as a middle-aged white guy, I got to confess, I never thought about that. Or a person of color said to me, as a person of color, there's neighborhoods I have to think about whether I can walk in. Again, a privilege I have. Risk. I remember being at my graduation in Toronto, And this guy saying to us as we put on our robes and met on our hats, he said, "I got through. They didn't change me one bit." I wanted to yank his degree out of his hand. If you start in any kind of educational program and you're at the beginning and the end the same, you fail in my books. Can we even say that we're allowed to fail these days? I don't know, but I say so. There's lots of time people run through their life bubble wrapped, fearing every possible risk before them. I know a man who said to me not long ago, and get this, he said, sometimes I'm at a party and I introduce myself this way. He said, "Hi," and this is not his name. "My name's Brian. I had an affair." Now, when I emailed him back and said, "Explain this a little bit," he said, "I introduce myself sometimes that way because that's what happened in my life and I want to be upfront with it. Sometimes people turn the other way. Sometimes they step in with tears in their eyes and they say, 'Me too.' What's the part of you that you're hiding that you might someday introduce yourself to?" He wrote me a beautiful poem, which I will not read, about why he does this. But in a sense, he was saying, this is me. This is who I am. This is the new me as I step forward with my past. If I look at my life and I move through it, there's lots of things I've done that you might call a risk, but they're not particularly. Going off to school where you don't know anybody, traveling. These were all luxuries. Moving to Alberta in 1988, getting married is risky. Getting divorced is risky. Remarrying is risky. Having a baby at 50 is crazy. They say you get younger. It's not true. I was way older than I was. The funny thing is that risk is part of our life, each and every one of us, and you may have made one to be here today already. And part of the reflecting that Steve might have indicated is we come to Sanctuary to daydream, I hope you are, and to reflect on your life as we move forward and we look backward at who we are. That's an important part of good religion, to reflect, to daydream, to imagine. You know, the funny thing, on your board is a person who teaches risk management at the University of Calgary. She teaches risk management, so of course I had to say, what would you say? Now she's off in Banff because we don't take attendance here. Here's the thing. This is what she said, and I love this. She said, in business, risk refers to uncertainty. We don't know all the outcome of a given activity or decision investment. And we take risks for the benefit and reward. The bigger risk of a potential award. Without risk, we run the risk of becoming stagnant, comfortable, trapped in our small world or our small self. The great paradox, she says, is not taking a risk. This is, in fact, the greatest risk. The polis of being too cautious is, in fact, the greatest risk of all. She concludes, taking no risk truly is the biggest risk of all. When we dare to risk, we dare to become more of who we were created to be. I am so glad she teaches at our university. Faith is by nature risky. We trust and have faith in things we do not know. And perhaps the greatest risk taker of all known in our scriptures is God. For God took the risk to create and then gave the risk to us to cultivate and take care of God's creation. God is perhaps the greatest risk taker. And as you heard last week, God's the one who excavated, who knows you and I, and God says, I dig you. I trust you. Jesus then in the flesh is perhaps the greatest risk taker of all, for you heard the text that Heather read a moment ago. Here's the text, and here's how it works. First, Jesus is baptized. Hello, baptized. You are my beloved child with whom I am well pleased at Jesus' baptism. Then he's sent into the wilderness to be tested and wrestled with his own power. What am I going to do with these tricks? Am I going to turn orange juice into wine? Am I going to turn stones into bread? Am I going to flee off the Tyre's temple? What will I do with my powers? And he's ministered to by the angels. And then comes to this text where he's invited to speak at his own home church. Now, do you think Jesus was a little bit nervous? I hope he was. Here's your day to speak. What are you going to speak? And so he stands in the temple and he opens up the book and the words of Isaiah. Blessed are the Lord is upon me. God has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, the recovery of sight to the blind, and set it free those who are oppressed. And everybody totally amazed. What a great diction, what great posture, what beautiful words. And then he goes on to speak about heaven being shut up. Now, I've never done this. I got to look at that as a text. Heaven was closed. Did you hear that? For 3 years and 6 months or something? I got to look into that one. Never saw that before. But then they started to say, wasn't that guy that was speaking, wasn't that Joseph, the guy around the cul-de-sac, the guy we saw standing at 7-Eleven, the one hanging out in the gang, that guy? Was that the one that just read this? Then if you go on in the text, they say, that's really nice, Jesus. And they attempt to push him off the cliff. If you weren't listening, read it. So they loved what he said. And then they thought about it. And that's when they decided to pitch him off the cliff. It says he snuck away in the midst of them. This is an amazing story of risk. For Jesus to proclaim all these things and then everybody to say that's awesome and then think about it and then want to kill him or at least throw him off a cliff. But just about everything Jesus said was risky. Think about it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Not just the ones you like, but those who you don't like. Or think about this. Whoever welcomes the least of these welcomes me, the hungry, the thirsty, the poor, the naked, those who haven't had a visit in a long time. Or how about this wisdom? What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses their soul? Or what about this? When Jesus had women in his early band of followers, he might be the first feminist, if you might think of it that way, the man who had different people of different status and symbol as part of his following. Jesus, perhaps the first feminist, I don't know. Or the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. My preacher teacher at Union Theological Seminary says, if you want to get in heaven, you know what you need? A letter of reference from the poor. I might be warm and hot. A letter of reference from the poor, he said. Just about everything Jesus said was risky business. And if we have a religion that's soft and cozy and comfy, we might just be missing the edge that is Jesus. But you need to know that this riskiness isn't off the top of our head reaction or control or trying to figure out things. It is actually a descending to your soul, to stepping into the place that each and every one of us has, that we go to a place of discernment so that what comes out of us in our risk is grounded in love. Grounded in love for us and for God's world. And so think of the risks that you might say you have. Is it rooted? Is it grounded in a knowing that you are loved? And when you speak from that place, trust me, you do so with incredible confidence and courage. Good religion means we are grounded in love and we risk in truth. Religion can be a great place to hide from God. And yet good religion invites us to know God right here, right now, in me, in you. And from that place, with confidence and courage, we take risks. Lots of churches and lots of church land is riskless. But one of the things I know about churches across this country that are thriving is that they are places that risk. And the 4 practices of this community, hospitality, spirituality, social justice, and risk, invite us to consider, how will we risk? How will we in love speak out, be out for others and for ourselves? You know, one of the greatest risks I ever took was leaving United Way, great organization, and coming back to the church. And when I did that, I was leaving a great organization that does great things. Trust me, you don't need churches to do great things. and step back into a church to consider what is our uniqueness, what is the difference we might offer and work together in partnership. And I came back to the church, not to play church. I did that for years. But to have real church, authentic conversation, real behavior, real discussion, whoever you are, wherever you're at, it better darn be real, or I'm out. And this came home to me on our first affirming service. And this is a risk. And I was away, and I was coming to that service, and I was scared shiftless. I truly was. Because I'd heard that people knew about it, and I heard there might be protesters, and there might even be conflict. I called my father-in-law and said, Tom, I need you to come to church. Okay. He came and he sat right there. He wasn't particularly a firm supporter. But sometimes you risk for another to show up for another. And it was a gift. And so I went into my office before the service, and this is back when I prayed by myself. Now Danielle's there, I can pray with her. I went into the room, and there was a prism that Deer Park United Church Sunday School had given me. And it was hanging in the window. And the sunlight came in, and all around the room was a dancing rainbow of white. And I smiled. And I remembered the symbol of the rainbow of God's covenant with us, and the symbol of that rainbow. And I risked to come in. And we celebrated, not that we arrived, folks, we sure haven't arrived. But we stepped in to say, we'll try. This community is real. This community is authentic. This community tries to be the best we can be, and we fall off the cliff or are pushed off the cliff all the time. But trust that just as that happens, God will be there and she'll catch you, brush you off, and send you on your way. Because that's who God is. She, he, spirit, wind, fire can only love us. And that love is our job to live. So I hope you'll risk today, tomorrow, and every day, trusting that when you do so, and it's rooted in love, God is with you. Amen.